Hi everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel. It's Grace, and today I'm going to be talking about some of my recent favorite nonfiction books. So this is going to be in no particular order. This is just a list of nonfiction books that I've read somewhat recently and have really enjoyed / would like to recommend to anyone who is interested. So recently I set an unofficial goal for myself to start reading more nonfiction, because nonfiction is not what I tend to pick up, but there's obviously a lot of value in it, and there are a ton of topics that I'm interested in reading nonfiction about. And so there are going to be 6 books that I want to talk about, and again, they're in no particular order, but the first one of them is going to be Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I think that I read this in March of this year. It was pretty recent. And so what this book is it's written in the format of a letter from the author to his son. And so the whole book is written in that format, sort of like an essay, but really just one long letter. And this book was an experience. It was beautifully written, and it's really about Ta-Nehisi Coates' experience as a Black man in America and what he wants to pass on to his son and what he wants to tell him, that things that he should know about his experiences. So this was a really interesting format in the sense that obviously it is nonfiction, but this is a hard book to rate in any sense, just because it was so deeply personal. This is one man's experience, and he really talks about it in depth, and he does bring up his perspectives on some historical questions and political and racial tensions in America right now, and he talks a lot about those things, but he's not necessarily pretending to present you with ideas. He's talking about his own experiences, and it's really honest and really powerful, and I was really glad that I read it. The second book that I want to talk about on this list is Why We Sleep: Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams by Matthew Walker, PhD. And I read this book in January of this year. It was actually one of the first books that I read in 2021, and it was so interesting because the author is a neuroscientist, and this is his area of expertise, and he knows what he's talking about, and he does such a good job laying out why sleep is so essential to our health. And he talks about so many different things in this book, like our circadian rhythms and the different cycles of sleep, REM sleep and deep non-REM sleep, and what dreaming actually is, and how different sleeping habits will affect your health in so many different ways, and how different people in different parts of the world sleep. And there is so much good content in this book, but the thing that stood out to me the most with it was the fact that Matthew Walker did such a good job of combining the scientific with explanations that anyone could understand. Because obviously I'm not a neuroscientist myself. I have learned my fair share about neuroscience in my anatomy courses and just generally in my physiology courses about signaling pathways and stuff and neurotransmitters, but I have I would say a medium amount of knowledge, but Matthew Walker just manages to take scientific explanations and terminology and has these masterful analogies to really just break it down and explain to you what's actually happening. So it was a really digestible book while still providing something for somebody who is in science as well, and just really something that everyone can enjoy. I did think that he got a little bit dramatic at the end of the book, trying to attribute a lot of problems to lack of sleep that maybe shouldn't be, but for the most part, up until the last maybe 30 pages, it was super grounded in science. He presents his evidence, and it was just so engaging and so interesting, and once you read it, you will never want to lose a night of sleep again. The third book on this list is Hood Feminism: The Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot by Mikki Kendall. And I read this in February actually for Black History Month. I thought that it would be appropriate. And this book is really interesting because Mikki Kendall takes a look at how there are a bunch of social issues that are very basic human needs that really should be looked at as feminist issues because they affect women. So she talks about things like food security and housing and living wages and access to quality education. And she really breaks down in here how these issues differentially affect people. I think that she primarily focuses on America, and obviously I'm Canadian, but a lot of these things apply across the board. And so Mikki Kendall really emphasizes the intersectional view here that all of these things affect different demographics differently, and you really have to pay attention to how they affect women and think about a much more comprehensive set of issues as feminist issues. And so I won't say too much more than that because she obviously articulates it a lot better than I can, but this was a really interesting book and I learned a lot. The fourth book that I have on this list is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. This is an interesting one because while this is nonfiction and I think that you can get a lot of value from it, really this provides one man's perspective because I really, really enjoyed Harari talking about early human civilizations and their patterns and how we evolved from hunter-gatherers into societies and how basically like social systems like money and the law and really how we became what we are today and what makes us human. But while I did enjoy this a lot and I would recommend it to get this perspective, he does gloss over a lot of things, and it's unavoidable. If you're going to talk about human history in a book this size, you're not going to be able to do it. But I did think that he glossed over the impact of a lot of social systems like religion. So there are times in this book, even though this is a valuable perspective, where I thought that Harari boiled things down too much and tried to make the concepts too basic in a way. Like, he sort of ignores the social context of things sometimes because really that is unentangleable from history. It would sort of take the societal context out of the term and really try to just boil it down and ignore all of the multitudes of definitions and complexities that are unavoidably associated with that concept, if that makes sense. I really don't know if it does because I'm having trouble articulating what I mean, but I think that if you've read this book already, you might understand what I'm saying. But anyway, I still think that this was a really interesting book and a really valuable perspective. I just think that it's important to note that there were some pretty major oversights as well. But I would recommend it. So the fifth book on this list that I want to talk about is So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. So what this book is about is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, but Ijeoma Oluo really provides like some historical context and some like personal and social context to having these conversations about race that are necessary but can also put a lot of strain on the minority group that is like being relied on to have the conversation with you. And so she kind of provides an outline in here about the correct way to go about having these conversations. And what I really like about this book is that she doesn't talk down to you. She really just like lays it out in a very understandable way. Honestly, I read this in like a day. It's just so digestible. She lays out a lot of terms and knowledge that people might not be familiar with, like what intersectionality is, or what affirmative action is, or what a model minority is. And so a lot of these concepts are in here, and there was just a lot of really valuable information and context, and I think that a lot of people could learn a lot about how to be more sensitive when they're having conversations about race by reading this book, and I really liked it. So the final book that I want to talk about on this list, I debated whether to actually put it on here or not because it is a memoir, but that is Educated by Tara Westover. And the reason that I debated about why to put this on here is because while it is nonfiction, it is Tara Westover writing about her life and her experiences. Obviously, memoirs are a little bit memory-based and they're not written like an autobiography. They really are a narrative And there have been some events in this book that have been disputed by one of her brothers, which is fine. She's talking about her own experiences, but I just want to have that as a disclaimer, where obviously nothing in this book can just be taken like purely as an objective view of what happened in the past, because one person speaking from their experience is never going to be able to provide that. But I still thought that it belonged on this list. And this book made me like very emotional in turns, happy and angry, and I cried during this book as well. Essentially, Educated is the story of Tara Westover and how she was raised. So Tara Westover was born to survivalists in the mountains of Idaho, and I just wanted to make sure that I got that right because I'm not familiar with that religion, but essentially Tara Westover grew up with a father who was afraid of the government and wanted to live a very separated life. So they lived way out in the country. They didn't go to hospitals. They didn't go to traditional school. And obviously the school one is a big focus because of the title, being educated. But their life was unfathomable to someone with my life experiences. And I just loved her story about how she overcame so much to be able to start getting a traditional education in the first place, and then she went on to get her PhD, and she is like an extremely highly educated individual. And the way that she wrote her narrative too was extremely heart-wrenching and emotional, and it felt very honest, and it felt like she was speaking from her heart. And so I just think that as readers, a lot of people are going to appreciate this because reading is definitely a form of education, and we take our access to knowledge and information, I think, for granted sometimes, and it just puts things into perspective in your life when you learn about someone like that and what they overcame to be able to get themselves some access to education. And it was a very, very moving book, and I would recommend it to anyone. So talking about nonfiction books is definitely a little bit different from talking about fiction books, but those are 6 nonfiction books that I've read semi-recently and really liked, and I would definitely recommend all of them for different reasons. And if you're interested in one of these books, please feel free to message me or drop a comment and ask me about it, and I would be glad to talk about them. Or if you've read one of them, let me know. And so I hope that you got something from this video, and maybe you'll be able to pick up one of these books and learn something about these subjects. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you would like to, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!